Welcome everybody, and greetings from ISEC. As you all know, this is the 17th Indo-US Economic Summit, and it's a flagship event of the Chamber. For those of you who have been a part of the inaugural session, Honorable Minister Nitin Gadkari was there, and he addressed all of us. The whole emphasis during his speech throughout and in the inaugural was on infrastructure. And you all would understand and know that, yes, infrastructure is the key segment today. Before we really move on, I would like to very briefly introduce all the panelists, although the write-up has already been sent. First, I welcome Mr. Matt Ingeniery. He is the Economic Growth Unit Chief at the US Embassy in India, responsible for the Indo-Pacific strategy, investment, infrastructure, women's economic empowerment, and financial and macroeconomic issues. He previously worked on trade and investment issues in Southeast Asia for 10 years, serving as Deputy Economic Counselor in Kuala Lumpur. And most importantly, for all of us, and interestingly, he has been an attorney in Washington, D.C. before joining the State Department. Which is very interesting, inspiring, for all of us. He specializes in mergers and acquisitions and intellectual property litigation. So most welcome, Matt, to this session.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Then we have Pradeep. Then we have Pradeep Ratnam. He's senior partner and co-chair of infrastructure, banking and projects finance practice with Cochin and Company. He has over 24 years of multi-judicial work experience in the field. He has been recognized amongst India's top 100 lawyers in India. He advises on transactions in banking, projects, and structural finance and restructuring. So I would say one of the key speakers today on the financial issues, which is what we would like to hear. Then we have Shailesh Pathak, a dear friend since a very long time. He is an alumni of IIM Kolkata. Friends, another interesting person. Out of his total professional career, half has been in the private sector and the other half as an IAS officer. So another very interesting person today on the panel. He has contributed greatly to the industry while in different organizations. Presently, he's a CEO of L&T Infra Development. He's an active participant in the Apex Chambers of Commerce. In fact, I've had the privilege of sharing the dais with him on several occasions. Then we have Abhishek Bhutani. He is the Managing Director, Bushman and Wakefield, Ahmedabad and Logistics and Industrial. He is a real estate professional with over 16 years of experience in P&L management and business development and operations. He holds an MBA degree in marketing and international business and is a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveys. I'm sorry. Lastly, we have Mr. Pankaj Dubey. He is, hi Pankaj. He is the co-founder and director of Power Global PBC and CEO and MD of Power Global Energy Private Limited. In his last position as MD of Polaris India, Mr. Dubey established the Indian startup of operations of the 100% subsidiary of Fortune 500 company Polaris Inc. Great, most welcome, Pankaj. And interestingly, again, like Shailesh, he is also an alumni of IIM Kolkata. So welcome to you, friends, and look forward to as I would see, the most exciting session in the 17th Indo-US Economic Summit. Right. The format would be, I would give a brief, and then I would request each of the panelists to give their views. The idea being that while we see these opportunities, there definitely would be challenges. I would request you to share your views on that. And then we would also like to see how the Indo-US partners, stakeholders can come together, right? So, as I mentioned, very exciting times for India in the infrastructure boom, whether we talk about roads, inland waterways, railways, aviation, power, you name it, and things are happening. It's buzzing with activity. The government of India has taken a lot of initiatives. As the minister said, right from the Prime Minister's address this year from the Red Fort towards Gati Shakti, which is the master plan to give 100 trillion for infrastructure boost. Then we have also heard the Honorable Minister saying that the US and Canada pension funds can be brought into India to invest in the road sector. We've also seen that new policies have been announced recently in the aviation sector, where they are targeting immediately 8 airports to be developed and then to attract investment. And of course, we've been hearing about the 100 airports to come up in the different regions. Then there are Sagarmala. Sagarmala, we have a lot of rivers which have been notified. The minister also talked about the roads, railways, and inland waterways to be integrated in such a manner that logistic costs come down. India at the moment faces very high logistic costs, which make us very, very uncompetitive in the international market. So this integration is what is now being looked at. We have been talking about asset monetization. This investment is taking place. So a lot of things are happening. But like I said, yes, there are challenges. And I would have liked to actually hear Matt's comments in the end, but I am now tempted to ask him to start with the panel discussion. Matt, may I request you to please start? Thank you.
Sure, and I apologize if I end up covering some of the same ground. You gave a better summary than I probably am about to. But I just say, we're looking at India's infrastructure development through two lenses. I'd say one is reviving economic growth post COVID, and the second is integrating India more fully into Indo-Pacific supply chains. And as nations seek to revive economic growth and develop manufacturing and create jobs in the wake of COVID-19, this is presenting India with an opportunity to more fully integrate into Indo-Pacific supply chains. Investors and manufacturers are increasingly seeking alternatives to China in the wake of rising costs, instability over trade wars, and now the instability revealed by the pandemic. As our recently departed Chargé Ambassador Atul Keshup put it, nobody can tolerate a single point of failure in the supply chain going forward. So we were encouraged that Prime Minister Modi has prioritized joining global and regional supply chains since his Independence Day speech in 2020. And that India has enacted several important economic reforms since, such as the recent repeal of retroactive taxation to improve the business and investment environment. But of course, much work needs to be done. That includes lowering trade barriers and tariffs, reforming land laws, and for those who have heard me speak at IACC events before, offering regulatory transparency and certainty. And we look forward to working together with the Indian government and our partners to demonstrate how free and open trade and clear and transparent regulations can enable economic growth. To how this relates to infrastructure, this gets to the point you just raised, which is foreign investors regularly tell us that poor logistics infrastructure is among the top drivers, if not the top driver, of higher costs for manufacturing for export in India, making the country on average 20% more expensive for manufacturing than China. And I think this goes to, along with some of the other issues I mentioned, to explain why, even as we've seen manufacturing and investment move out of China over the last 5 years or so, that India's largely lost out on the investment for joining supply chains to competitors like Vietnam and in some cases Bangladesh. Nonetheless, we're encouraged to see India's ambitious infrastructure plans that will plan to attack this head on and can further help expand the economy, foster greater regional connectivity, and position India as an alternative manufacturing hub in Indo-Pacific supply chains to China. As you mentioned, the Indian government is investing heavily in infrastructure development to move the country beyond the severe economic downturn caused by COVID-19. This builds on existing initiatives that you spoke of, such as the $2 trillion National Infrastructure Pipeline that was announced in 2019, the ongoing efforts to develop and improve coastal and inland waterways ports, as well as build 100 airports. Despite the pandemic and economic costs, the government deserves praise for protecting capital expenditure in 2020, particularly investments in infrastructure. In February, Minister Sitharaman increased infrastructure spending by 30% in the fiscal 2021-22 budget. And then, as you just noted, in August, the Indian government announced two major economic initiatives to promote infrastructure development and investment: the National Monetization Pipeline and Gati Shakti. And these plans will focus on strengthening and integrating transportation infrastructure, including inland waterways and roads, two long-standing sectoral priorities in India. Now, I'd like, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to focus on three of those subsectors where we see potential for U.S. Engagement, or we currently have U.S. engagement. First would be inland waterways, which has been my personal obsession the 3 years I've been in India. The Indian government has devoted unprecedented attention and resources to develop inland waterways infrastructure over the last 5 years. Inland waterways transportation offers significant advantages over other modes, with costs estimated to be 30% lower than freight rail and 60% lower than interstate trucking. And inland waterways cargo movement is also more environmentally friendly than other modes of transport, with some studies suggesting that use of inland waterways for commodities shipments could reduce carbon emissions by almost 50% compared to the current use of trucks. Since 2016, the Indian government has developed over 3,000 miles of navigable inland waterways and increased cargo volume growth at a compound annual rate of 19%. Despite the pandemic, India's inland waterways sector continues to expand at a rapid pace in both 2020 and 2021. Inland waterways share of overall cargo increased from 0.5% in 2016 to 2% in 2021. So while still low, that's more than a quadrupling. The US government views inland waterways as a key sector for improving supply chain logistics efficiency and reducing carbon emissions. We have prioritized supporting development of inland waterways through our International Transaction Assistance Network, US Army Corps of Engineers programs, and commercial outreach by the Foreign Commercial Service. Let's turn briefly to roads. Investment in roads and highways also remained resilient throughout the pandemic. India achieved record-breaking road construction and expansion in 2020 and 2021, increasing the length of national highway construction by 30% during April 2020 to March 31, the last fiscal year. Since April, the start of the current fiscal year, the government has awarded projects on 17% more miles of road than the previous record-breaking fiscal year. So we are on path to another record-breaking year. And India plans to continue the pace of expansion and by 2025 operationalize 23 new access-controlled highways, as well as build ancillary and support infrastructure, including 35 multimodal logistics parks and 600 wayside amenities stations. Those who remember the lockdown also remember that we had trouble when we tried to restart interstate trucking last year due to issues with the wayside amenities stations and them either being closed or there being insufficient numbers open to fully revive interstate trucking, even after permits were issued. We are in early discussions with both the government and the U.S. Department of Transportation to determine how best the United States can collaborate with India in this effort under revitalization of the U.S.-India Transportation Partnership. And then finally, I want to turn to civil aviation. It's an area where IACC itself has been historically involved and played a great role. Prior to the pandemic, India had experienced over a decade of rapid growth in the civil aviation market, making it the third largest in the world after China and the United States. India's civil aviation sector, like many others, has been hit hard by COVID-19 and has been slow to recover. Last week, as you noted, the Ministry of Civil Aviation announced a 100-day plan to promote an aviation sector recovery. This outlines policy measures and reforms, and including a new policy for maintenance, repair, and overhaul aimed at making India a global hub for MRO. 90% of India's MRO business currently occurs outside of the country. There really is no reason for that. And it increased costs and carbon emissions flying planes out to places like Singapore for routine maintenance. With advantageous policy reforms, MRO can pave the way for U.S. private sector investment and overall aviation sector growth in India. And we'll continue to work with India both through the Aviation Cooperation Program that's industry-led, as well as our own bilateral engagements with Federal Aviation Administration and the Transportation Security Administration. Finally, I want to conclude with a quick plug for the Indo-Pacific Business Forum. This will be held on October 28th and 29th. And the U.S. will partner to sponsor this fourth iteration of the forum. This is the first time that the Indo-Pacific Business Forum will be hosted in India, and the first time it will focus in South Asia. The previous three were largely focused on Southeast Asia. And the forum is a key event that advances our shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific and brings together senior government and business leaders from across the Indo-Pacific region to discuss opportunities and identify challenges. So we are currently in discussions with the government of India about senior level speakers, as well as setting up panels that will be largely led by industry, and we hope to have the registration for that event up soon. So that ends with my commercial, and thanks for your attention and your time.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was very encouraging, especially when you mentioned about the Inland Waterway. That is also very close to my heart. And I've been following it up for quite many years. And I'm sure we can work together. IACC is there. We've been following it up for the past many years. And how the American companies can come in, whether it's the dredging, whether it's the port management, whether it's the navigation, or even if it's operating of the cruises. I don't know if you have been to one of them, but it's really very nice. It's a 5-star luxury cruise which we see. You also spoke about civil aviation. Yes, very exciting. I am very tempted to ask you a question, which we will do probably later on, because I was just being told by the Secretariat that because of the first inaugural session, spilling over, we will have some time constraint. So I will request my other panelists to please consider that. right? Now, may I request Pradeep to give his views on what he feels are the opportunities and what he feels are the challenges. We would like to hear some challenges as well.
Thank you very much, everybody. There's Mr. Wick, there's a sense of deja vu because I think we were on the same panel exactly a year ago. So, you know, while COVID's kind of put a break on our lives, when I was retrospecting and preparing something on this, I just realized that, you know, there have been tectonic shifts as far as infrastructure is concerned, because, you know, the National Infra Pipeline with its, you know, 1.9 trillion, you know, number of assets have come on stream. And now we also have the National Monetization Pipeline, which is coterminous with the NIP, where the government's offloading a large number of assets into the infrastructure space. As Mr. Ingeneri rightly mentioned, I mean, this is the ultimate augment to a frailing economy. I think India has recognized the fact that, you know, we really need to up our game as far as infrastructure is concerned, not just from a macroeconomic perspective, but essentially we are significantly capacity constrained when it comes to quality operating assets. So all these signs are encouraging. My role is really to comment on the legal and regulatory aspects of it. And as an infrastructure lawyer, there are a number of points that come to my mind, which are encouraging. And there are a number of deficits, which in this room we're all aware of, right? Let me talk about the positive points first. Over the last year, one of the most significant kind of offtakes that I'm able to see is Madam Finance Minister's budgetary allocation to, you know, making projects financially viable through a developmental financial, the National Bank of Infrastructure when it's going to open with 20,000 crores. To me, that is, as a practicing infra lawyer, really it boils down to financing. I mean, even if you look at the infra pipeline, you know, 40% from the states, 40% from the center, but the balance 20% of that 1.9 trillion is going to come from private capital. And currently, we do need to ask this hard question as to where's that money going to come from, because clearly banks with their relatively short tenor are not going to be able to fund this, as we've realized from Infrastructure 1.0, the first generation of infrastructure reforms that we've had in the last 15 years. So definitely there is a room now for, in addition to the Canadian pension funds who are already there, to also look at large, you know, the Honorable Roads Minister talked about Gati Shakti and bringing in patient capital from the United States and from other places, Western jurisdictions into India. And that really is the way forward. But to achieve that, you need bankable projects, right? You cannot have discoms which are profligate. You cannot have, you know, sectors which do not have independent regulators. And that's where I'm seeing encouraging signs, right? I'm seeing new policies coming in which say, you know, carrot and stick. So if the discom wants money, it has to demonstrate operational efficiency. It will have to show AT&C losses coming down and so on and so forth. So that's one positive piece of the pie that I'm seeing. From a contracting perspective, I think there are two things I'm seeing. One is with relatively mature sectors like roads, there has definitely been an improvement. I mean, all of us who are in the infra space would look back at the days of now deceased Gajendra Haldia and in the Planning Commission and negotiating with him on the roads concession agreement and trying to win and really kind of facing brickbats, you know, and somewhat some amount of hostility if you represented the private sector, to a point where I think the MCA for a hybrid annuity project is now a fairly stable document. But if you look at rail, for example, which is the next generation of reforms, 35 rolling stock operated and maintained contracts that were rolled out by Indian Railways started off with about 100 bidders. At the end of it, we were left with 2. So clearly, I think the government is getting this message that command and control, you know, sort of excessively skewed contracts which treat the private sector as some kind of interloper, some kind of an outsider who's out to make a fast buck, won't necessarily you know, go that long way, right? So if you look at, I've done a detailed analysis of the rail contracts, and I was, you know, I was disappointed by the way it was structured, but I was encouraged by the fact that the government has taken private sector's feedback quite sort of, you know, quite positively, and we can expect some changes in that. In addition to that, I think the only 2 points, Mr. Wig, I want to make is, one is clearly there's a role for the digital economy and infrastructure. You're seeing a lot of convergence there. Logistics is a huge area where there's cloud and artificial intelligence, all of those things that are coming in. So infrastructure, whether you talk about highways constructions, drones are now coming in to monitor construction, resulting in efficiencies, managing cost overruns, and some of the some of the sort of endemic issues that plagued infrastructure projects in the first generation of infra in India. And the last point I want to make, which is really now the delightful and exciting elephant in the room, which is green hydrogen and going sort of EV, which I know some of the other panelists will talk about. That really is the future of infrastructure. So whether it is hybrid wind and solar projects, whether it is storage batteries, whether it is fiscal augmentation being given to the public sector utilities to try and, through VGF funding, to try and use green hydrogen and some of those efforts, those are really the future of infrastructure contracts going forward. I think it's a tremendously exciting time. Primarily to do with the fact, there's one more point I wanted to make. As I joke about my infrastructure practice as becoming a real estate practice now, because most of us don't make our money anymore on regular infra contracts. We make a lot of money on land diligence. That is where I'm seeing a huge changes of the ground, because the government's kind of realized that with land, in India, given its complexities, unless you have effective intermediation, so you bring in a body which acquires the land for you. So you have solar parks, you have multimodal logistics parks, etc., which takes away the headache, for want of a better word, of having to negotiate with land acquisition. You're never really going to have bankable infrastructure projects. So the big change I'm seeing in the last 12 months is that some of the uncertainties with land, which previous contracts were facing, is now increasingly becoming a thing of the past. I could go on and on, but I'm mindful, Mr. Wake, that you want me to keep quiet. So I will now pass the baton to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pradeep. I think this is one of the great pluses of a lawyer. That is the importance of time, which they do understand very well. Thank you so much. Well, you mentioned about, again, like I said, we will discuss this later on once all the panelists have spoken. But you mentioned about the road contracts, and then you talked about the railway contracts. I'm tempted to ask that if the road contracts can be successful, why not the railways? It's the same government. If the same government can frame one set of documents in one way, why not for the other vertical? This later on. Then my second observation is, like you rightly said, land acquisition has become easier than what it was earlier. We see a change, a dramatic change in the road construction. L&T is there, and L&T will vouch for it, that yes, road construction has become better, faster, maybe turning out to be economical. Anyway, now may I request Shailesh. Shailesh, eagerly we will want to hear from you, because you have been on both sides of the table. You have been on the government side for good 16 years, 17 years, and now you're on the private side. So you would be able to tell us where the bottlenecks are in the infrastructure development. Please, all to you.
Thank you, Ashish, and ladies and gentlemen, namaskar. I'd like to start with a personal story. I began my career in Bombay, as it then was, in 1986. And 1990, I drove from Bombay to Delhi. And the Americans who don't know about a company called Maruti, 1990 state-of-the-art was Maruti 800. So I drove that Maruti 800 from Bombay to Delhi. It took me 3.5 days. In less than 6 months from now, once the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway gets going, the same journey I'll be able to do in less than 20 hours. So that is what has changed in 31 years. And now to jump forward, more in infrastructure will change in India in the next 10 years than we saw in the last 30 years. So all of us are business people, right? We are into cash flows. So let's talk about how to generate cash flows. I was listening to Matt, and he was talking about, inland waterways. He was talking about highways, and he was talking about civil aviation. Now, very briefly, a commercial for Larsen & Toubro is that if you have landed from anywhere outside India into an Indian airport, there is a 97% chance that you landed in an airport built by Larsen & Toubro. This company has been around for 80 years, and it's fairly large in infrastructure. Till recently, I was CEO of the development projects vertical, a subsidiary of L&T, where we had $1 million per day of cash flow incoming. And we had 49% shareholding by the largest Canadian pension fund. So we are used to developing, investing, developing, constructing, and operating assets in energy, transport, and others. In terms of how, Indians could make cash flow happen in the US and Americans could make cash flow happen in India, I would broadly say that you could either put dollars or rupees at work, or you could put brain power at work, so consulting and advisory, including analysts here, and you could produce goods or services that are worthy of consumption in the other geography. I just suggest that if you look at the first option, that is dollars, I do not see a very bright chance of American construction companies giving competition to the Indian construction companies within India. But I do see a lot of potential in the operational stage, because things that are getting constructed are very different from things that are getting operated. My favorite example in a Delhi context would be the upcoming Noida Jewar Airport versus the existing T3 airport. These are very different dynamics for construction and for operations. Since I'm speaking from my Bombay office, Mumbai, the Navi Mumbai airport versus the existing T2 terminal are very different dynamically. So would an American construction company be interested in giving competition to an L&T in Jewar International Airport? Probably not. But can they add value to the operation of T3 by GMR? Probably yes. So that's the first thing in terms of dollars. And the way Canadian and Australian pension funds have come into India for long-term patient capital annuity kind of returns, I'm sure CalPERS has been evaluating the opportunity for a long time. And that is certainly a potential only after construction is over. And the good news is the government of India has come up with structures like INVITs, Infrastructure Investment Trusts, and TOTs, and other such structures where profitably cash deployment in dollars is possible. The second is brain power, and that I would say is consulting, that is legal services, that is design, and you have a whole lot of potential on both sides of the table, the American side and the Indian side, to make that work. The final thing is goods and services. So construction equipment, we've got a lot of construction equipment already from the US. I'm sure in terms of high-tech construction equipment, we will be looking towards that. But let me just step back and say that in 2007, that's 14 years ago, I was in a US-India CEOs forum in Bombay, in Mumbai, where our then Finance Minister Chidambaram and the American Secretary of Treasury, Hank Paulson, were there. And you had the largest names around the table. You had, JP Morgan, you had Blackstone, you had Lehman and others. And they said that a wall of money is going to hit India from the US in infrastructure. That was in October 2007. We know how that turned out. So I'd just say, let's not talk about walls of money. Let's talk about the kind of patient capital investing in terms of dollars. Let's certainly encourage the brain power exchange, and let's look at goods and services. Last point, before 1955, the US didn't have interstates really. It was only Eisenhower and his 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act, which led to 41,000 kilometers of interstates. Now, India, in terms of highways, has so far not done too many interstate-like expressways. Most of our work has been 2 lanes to 4 lanes or single lane to double lane. The next 5 years is going to see a lot of interstate kind of construction in India. And Minister Gadkari talked about 23 dedicated access controlled expressways. So we are going over to the next level in terms of road transport. We talked about the NIP, the NMP. But Gati Shakti is putting it all together. Gati means speed and Shakti means strength or power. So logistics are all about transporting a person or a product from point A to point B in the least possible cost at the least possible time. And we already heard how 20% manufacturing cost is higher in India because of our inefficient logistics. So this is going to change dramatically with the coming of the dedicated freight corridor, with the coming of the high-speed rail, and all this is going to happen in the next 6 to 7 years. However, what is continuing to grow is not the linear infrastructure that is connecting cities. What is going to continue to grow is the cities themselves. So to take an example, the Mumbai-Pune Expressway became operational in 2002. But Mumbai and Pune have since then grown like this. The Noida-Agra Expressway became operational in 2004. But since then, Noida and Agra have grown like this. So the US has 9 cities, which are 1 million plus in population. India has 53. But the attention to city governance, city infrastructure, urban management is far, far better in the US. And that is one thing that we would like to see very much going forward in the next 10 years. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you so much. As usual, you have touched some very, very important points. That's the knack that you have. I've always been seeing that. One always did wonder that when there is so much of scope in the infrastructure development sector in India, why do we not see a lot of American companies come here? And you have highlighted, you have mentioned very well that yes, commercially in the construction point, they may not be competitive because yes, we have cheap labor, we have a lot of people here. But then you mentioned that yes, they can go into the operations side, which is, I think, very valid. You also did mention there is a lot of other scopes, other areas. There is consultancy, there is design. In fact, I was to mention, which I probably missed in my earlier remark, that the minister talked about the vehicle scrapping policy. Now, that is something we do have in India, but it's an unorganized way which is happening. We have seen a lot of that in America. Maybe we can see in the future some companies wanting to come in here. Tunneling, bridges is again what is taking shape. So thank you very much, Shailesh. Friends, may I now welcome Abhishek Bhutani. He is as I said, the Managing Director of Bushman, Wakefield, Ahmedabad and Logistics. Abhishek, your views.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wake, and a very, very good afternoon to my fellow panelists. A very, very encouraging and, learning session for me. I represent Bushman and Wakefield as a capacity of, developing the logistics and industrial practice that we do. We touched the real estate part of it. So far, what I've been hearing in other forums is always about logistics, multimodal transportation, getting new ways, expressways coming up. There's a backside infra to it as well, and that particular sector is a sector where I work in. We talk about getting expressways connected, but we don't realize that there's a point where from the material is getting picked up, there's a point where the material has to be delivered. We say labor is cheap in India, but is that efficient? Because inside the warehouse, if you don't have your efficiencies level, then there's no point of connecting getting reduced, the transit time getting reduced. Just to give an example, when e-commerce started in India, they had the pressure of volumes, they had the pressure of lesser spaces and delivering to a larger ecosystem. So initial days, the average throughput was not even crossing about 5,000 orders per day. Today, it has reached the mark of 50,000 orders in the peak day. So that efficiencies, that technical knowledge is getting down into the sector. What this sector demands is today, logistics as a whole ecosystem is getting recognition by the government, but the warehouse space development is still a topic which is not touched. My fellow panelist Pradeep touched a very sensitive topic which is very close to me, which is land. It is probably the toughest part in India to acquire. And a lot of our clients still struggle to buy land in India because the diligences fall through. The way we have maintained the records over the years, it's not aligned across the country. I mean, it's different. Every state that you go, every tehsil that you go and touch, it's very different. The another bleeding aspect is the funding part of it, because this particular element of developing the warehousing space is not getting the due recognition. The funding is not so easily available. So aspiring entrepreneurs, you don't hear about many startups. You don't hear about many youngsters taking up this taking up this field as a passion, as a career opportunity, because the funding for the startup, funding for the development is not so easily available yet. Even though we have been talking about big on the logistics sector, the focus coming onto it. Then the technical know-how of how to manage the efficiencies inside a warehouse is still restricted to only companies which are trying to evolve around it. Balance are still trying to capitalize on the aspect that the labor is cheap in India. So there's a huge median, if I say, from what it is in one warehouse to the other. And lastly, I would like to cover the infrastructure sustenance, the longevity, because the buildings that you build, these are outside your cities. These are in the rural areas. These are big format constructions that we normally see when we travel on highway from one state to the other. But how do you sustain, how do you maintain the infra that side? Because the government has still not laid down the infrastructure required. So these buildings, these parks, they sustain on their own. They survive on their own. So what is technically required, what is very much required for this particular sector, especially on this forum, is India is getting connected better and getting connected faster, but then we need to bring in efficiencies as well. We need to bring in the technical know-how. As Shailesh mentioned, that yes, construction in India against somebody who's an Indian versus an American company is tough. I do agree with him on that aspect, but then the operational knowledge becomes very critical. And that's the success formula that we can bring in. And on top of it, sustaining and maintaining the infrastructure is equally important. We have been mentioning about Canadian pension funds, US pension funds. That money has already started coming into this particular sector, but it's struggling to find a right piece that they can buy, that way they can invest. So it's like, money is waiting on, at your doorstep, and you're not able to utilize it because of the challenges in the ecosystem that we are operating. So certain action items, certain things that we really look forward is, bring the efficiency. Imagine US is how big it is geographically as compared to India. Still, the cost of supply chain is very less, very minimal in US as compared to when you compare the population and the size of US. Imagine that much efficiencies we're bringing into India. And as we said, we have 53 cities where population is more than 1 million. Imagine that volume adds up. We can be the lowest cost, we can be the country where the supply chain cost is the lowest in the world. That's practically possible. But it has to come in a right format. It has to come in a right way, and it has to be learned by us as well. It's not only coming in, it has to be absorbed by us as well. That's there. And then, yes, when I talk about the investments coming in, investments just don't come on their own. They come along with knowledge as well. They come on, how can you do it better? How can it be utilized better? So there's always a ways to it. There has been a lot of focus by the government to support the infrastructure development in terms of the funding, but I somehow feel this sector is completely ignored. This sector is not getting the due recognition on the funding aspect as well from the government side, and it has a lot of potential. To give an estimate, in last 7 to 10 years, about 300 million square feet of space has already been built, standing on the ground and delivered across various locations in India, out of which 70% is between 6 metro cities only, and balance is all spread across. So that is the potential this sector has. The 300 million square feet getting built on its own without the support that's duly required is a scale that we can build up. imagine if we have that support coming in, what it can be, where it can be taken to. So I'll not take much of time over here because as you mentioned, Mr. Vig, we're running out of time over here. So over to you. Probably these are some of the sectors, it's a very niche sector that I represent over here. Apart from the infra and the technical know-how, which we can get benefit from the Indo-US relationships. That's what I wanted to highlight on this particular forum. And with that, I hand it over back to you, Mr. Vig.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. It is, I would say, an eye-opener. In fact, this is the whole purpose of our programs. This session, like I said earlier on, this session will talk about, should have spoken and has spoken about the issues, opportunities, challenges that the infrastructure sector does face. There are opportunities. We all are talking about opportunities, but you and like other panelists have also mentioned on the challenges that we are facing. And friends, I would like to request that if you can send an email to us, giving your very, very brief idea or your observation on the opportunities and more so the challenges that we face. It would be great if you can also suggest ways to overcome. Like you did mention that, we have infrastructure sustenance, longevity is something probably which should be taken care of. Maintaining is very important. Absolutely correct, because we've all been talking about creating it, but maintaining is very important. Shailesh, you mentioned about T3. So, if the maintenance is not there, then all your effort is gone. So very nice. If all of us can, just put in some points, because we normally, as a requirement of the chamber, we put together all the suggestions and we forward it to the ministry, the concerned ministries, so that our suggestions are addressed, taken care of as far as possible, and implemented in the benefit of all the stakeholders. So I would be looking forward for your cooperation in this regard. Friends, now I invite Pankaj. Pankaj is the co-founder and director of Power Global PBC. I've already, in my brief opening remarks about everybody, mentioned about Pankaj. And Pankaj, please, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vik. It's really a pleasure to be on this forum. And I come from a background of automobiles, and now I am getting into, the energy space, where we are looking at creating more e-vehicles on the marketplace. So we are making some retrofit kits and also the lithium-ion battery packs to facilitate this movement on the electric vehicle. When we talk about the infrastructure and the logistic costs that we have, I would like to share that these infrastructure costs that we are talking about and the logistic cost being high in India, it can definitely be improved and reduced with the more better and faster infrastructure that Minister highlighted and Shailesh also highlighted. So you can have that, and with that infrastructure, when the time gets reduced, you would be able to reduce the supply chain cost, the logistic cost. But one other element that I bring in and on which I am working is the vehicles movement. That also, and the cost of the fuel that is used on the vehicle also adds to a lot of cost on the logistics side. And here we are talking about, converting the existing petrol and diesel vehicles to electric. And thereby we know that the cost of operating comes down to almost 70% on a per kilometer basis of the running cost on per kilometer basis. So with that, it will facilitate and lower down a lot of stress on the extra cost that is there in India for logistics or for the movement in the country. The other thing which is very critical, which Minister also highlighted, is the e-ways on the infrastructure. I'm sure Shailesh would be working on that, but that is where, when you make such highways and you create like infrastructure, which is like facilitating e-vehicles, it will not just yield, a low carbon emission in the country, it will meet our targets that we have set in there, but also it will be a much lower and a silent vehicle movement all over the place, and it will reduce the cost dramatically of our movement on the highways. So what I feel is the infrastructure to be built around e-vehicles is something which is being spoken to, but a lot needs to be done. So that is the issue, and that is a challenge. How do we create that? I've been working on this concept, and we've had some of the infrastructure there giving ideas on this, and we can create something like what the infrastructure of the petrol and diesel fuel pumps are there. Like that, we have to create that energy infrastructure. We are developing very nice solutions on batteries, where we have a swappable batteries. You can move to the station of the energy stations, and you can just swap the battery less than the time that you spend on refueling your vehicle, but you can just swap your existing battery and move around and facilitate. So, but these energy stations will come at the infrastructure development would come at a cost, and somewhere the balance has to be struck between the number of vehicles which are there on the road and also the infrastructure that comes up. Most of the companies, they've been very progressive. Some of them I know came from America, and they invested into the Indian infrastructure, created that EV platform, and realized that it's not working out because of the number of vehicles being less. With this scrappage policy that Minister highlighted today, and also the EV vehicles are exempted from there. So if you have an EV vehicle, then it will not be scrapped. So, and then we're creating a solution where we convert the existing petrol and diesel vehicle to electric. All that combined would reduce not just the emission, but also the cost of the operations on the road. And I think it will be a substantial area to look into, and also to bring down the cost of the supply chain and movements in the country. So I'm doing a lot of work on this, and I'm looking at partners who can help us. And I'm sure I get an idea that I can talk to Shailesh also on this. So this, thanks to this forum, a lot of flow of information is there, which is very interesting. And the kind of infrastructure that we have seen, the growth that we see today is really phenomenal. Like when we moved from one city to another earlier, it used to take 2 to 3 years. Now you can do that in half an hour. My colleague was saying that he went from Noida to Meerut in half an hour, which was never possible before. So these kind of a development, we are at a very good pace, and the kind of initiative that the minister and the government is taking, and cognizance of all these important things, is I think we are in the best of the time for India to grow in future, and infrastructure definitely has to be leading this growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pankaj. And as I did mention, the role of a chamber, as you know, is basically to get the stakeholders together and give them an opportunity to work together. And I've just seen Shailesh giving you a thumbs up, which is what the chamber is. So very nice. In fact, we have run out of time, and maybe soon enough, I would like to meet Matt and understand from him, how can we as a Indo-American chamber assist in getting more American companies into India? In fact, Bechtel, one has heard of Bechtel, but Bechtel is a very big company, American company, which was in India doing lots of works, and we don't really see them around. One should understand, in fact, the chamber, which is the Indo-American chamber, we would like to know how we can, sort these things out, especially when we have huge development in progress in infrastructure, and Bechtel is one of the leading, Raytheon is another one. We know all these companies. So anyway, the other session, the panelists are waiting, I'm just told by the Secretariat. So
saved by the bell.
I would like, I would come and visit you, Matt, because really, we would want the companies to come in and with your support, and also in the inland waterways, which is close to your and my heart, we can talk on that, how we can progress. Friends, thank you so much once again. It has been a very exciting panel discussion. I wish we had another hour with us. We could have spoken amongst each other, but then maybe some other time we will organize this. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.